Thank you, Roberto, very much for these thoughts, with your deep thoughts that you bring to the table when talking about social determinants in a different context. Now we have a small problem that we have to resolve, which is that Paulo has just joined us, has to go away in a few minutes. So we have decided to give him the floor. Also, we are going to be holding a debate with Jaime and Roberto now. We are going to give the floor to Paulo, and then at the end we hold the debate. Paulo needs no introductions. He is the director of International Affairs of Fiocruz. He was also president and also a director of the School of Public Health, and was in prominent figures in public health in Latin America. Paulo is going to be talking to us about the social determining factors in the global agenda. Good afternoon. I will try to speak. Actually, have Portuguese, have Spanish. I think that when losing communication, I'm going to gain in understanding, comprehension, because I was thinking to myself, how can translators translate the complexity of Roberto's thought? I think that this is very hard, so I'd rather to lose. Well, I'm not saying that the translators are not good. They are good, but also with the speed and the complexity of Roberto's thought, it would be impossible. I imagine it's not the translator's fault. And secondly, I would like to apologize for being late. Today it was a very terrible day. A lot of things happened simultaneously in the Fiocruz agenda. And also I would like to say that I'm very enchanted. I'm glad to be able to share this roundtable with Roberto, with Jaime, who is far away. With Roberto, we studied together. We were colleagues. He was much more brilliant than me. I was a clinician, and Roberto, it was actually an illuminated thinker, actually. Imagine what happened in the master's course. He was much brighter than I was, and Oscar is a great friend of ours. We worked also closely. I have two options to talk about this topic that was given to me by the organizers of the event, also determinants in the global agenda, believing basically in what the documents state. And another possibility is to share with you my concern that since we're talking about rhetorics, when we talk about the international field, in this idea, the international declarations and what they all entail, rhetorics and almost kind of in a pretext to make things faster, where we have no commitment with what is being stated in the international agenda. So I think that I'm going to start by perhaps actually locating what is actually contained in the international documents, in the international agenda, and then I will try to make a reflection, a critical reflection, or call the attention to what is critical in the contents of the international documents that are almost all of them very, very positive and very good. Also, nothing can be even added to these documents. We have to acknowledge that the documents are wonderful, but they're rhetoric documents, and there's a big issue today in the international agenda. So, now, initially, I'm going to we'll talk about social determinants factors in the international agenda through the interpretations made in the analysis of the discourse, and I'll give a backdrop within the international organizations and of those who make up the international organizations that are our governors and our presidents and us. Many times we are there working, we are preparing documents in the international agenda. So we take the Constitution of the World Health Organization. It's unbelievable. The Charter of 1948, it's almost, it's spotless. Nothing should be changed in the Constitution discourse of WHO. The states that health is a human right, and that it's a fundamental, basic right, and the people have the right to access to quality health with no differentiation of race, religion, political creed, of social position. Should we change something in the WHO Charter of 1948? Nothing. So, really, no. When is it? No, 60 years have gone by. Over 6 years have gone by. Nothing can be changed, I believe. Then, as a principle, actually, we do have that it's a responsibility incumbent of the governments. Well, they have to take care of the health of their people, and the responsibility should be translated into health, public health, and social measures. And also,
that's mission of the WHO to promote with other international organizations improvement in feeding, free time and work and other matters regarding this. Something else to add? We have in the Constitution of WHO, in the Magna Carta, everything that we should understand today as facing the social determinants and how to face them. Probably we're not talking here of this. We're going to talk about global determinants or extra border determinants when we start with what was identified as the globalization. That is something that has more than 150 years, globalization. But globalization, proposed by a connection of the Consensus of Washington, combined with the IMF, with the World Bank, with the Organization of Trade Organization, and with the influence of the transnational companies, that was to turn the state smaller as a minimum state, with strong market forces and free forces, and this will solve all the problems that the world had in many years of after the war and after the good moments when they start going backwards in the economical growth. And this, in the 80s or 90s, would be solved with the turning the state smaller and with free forces that will correct all the matters of inequality, the lack of capacity of consumption of people, happiness, etc. So, what would be lacking in this document of WHO, the Magna Carta, to discuss the social determinants, will be a dialogue with globalization. But I think that before, all the proposals and all of the recipes done by the World Bank and by the FMI, they were shown incapable of solving one side, the life of people, and the other side, the desires of the transnational companies and the international economy. That also was not solve the margins of wealth and the penetration of the countries that were interested in penetrating. So with this, we are able to verify from the year 2000, not the rebirth of the social determinants or determination. That was not rebirth. It was organized at the level, international level, in the WHO. They create the World Commission of Social Determinants. We are talking about the dominant thinking. All the Latin American ministers that we have, very good people that represent this current, like Roberto, Jaime, Temporan, and many others that are present here, like Feo. But in the action, dominant action of thought, when we identify the WHO as one of the main actors And the governance of the global health, that is another important topic. This is organized in the year 2000 under the leadership of Michael Marmachit, the International Commission of Social Determinants. And after 2005 until 2008, when the Commission started working, there was a shake-up of the topic of social determinants. And to discuss the topic of what to do with this level of global determinants of health, if we recognize that they exist, and they exist, we're going to talk about from my point of view, are those. We have to think on governance, global governance, and probably there we have to do 3 or 4 definitions. The global governance, the global governance and health. A third one will be the global governance for health, when deals with the effects of the global governance with health. And a fourth, that would be the governance of the global health. It's not a game of words. It's some different approaches and different ways of working that are different from each other. When we think about the global governance, we all know that there are several external conditions to the national borders that have an enormous importance regarding the political economy, the government practices, and the effects of the economy on health that are external to the health sector and international. They're going to generate an influence on the global situation, social situation, and health situation. They're going to influence each of the countries in the social and health situation. And from my point of view, 4 main ones. One are the non-regulated activities of the global corporations. And then we have the financial corporations, the industrial corporations, and the trade corporations. When we're able to identify the financial economical crisis, 2007, 2008, today it's very clear that this is a deep crisis on the capitalistic model of consumption and production that has tremendous influence on the economic and social and health matters in each country, including the countries, central countries of the capitalism. It was published a book recently of one of the researchers of Stanford University regarding the effects, not exclusively of the economical and financial crisis, but of the answer given by the governments with policies regarding suicide and the situation of health. When we consider Black Hispanics and not representing race, but the social economical levels, this book is producing a tremendous shake-up in many ways of traditional thinking of the government in many segments of the academia in the developed countries and in the developing countries. So the non-regulated activities of global corporations is a very important social determinant of health at a global level and at the level of each country that you may consider. And we always ask ourselves, if we want to change something, having health as a center of our concern, the collective and human health of our populations, what would be the strength correlation that we're going to have to change these economical practices of these corporations. Do we have any possibility of changing this? This is not a WHO. We have to direct this to the Organization of the United Nations as a whole, because we have there the problem that United Nations recommends, but there is a sovereignty of the states and implementing decisions that they sign. So this is a very important thing between what the statements mean and the agreements mean and what the implementation is in the countries. And now the important cause of these inequalities, social and health inequalities that have to do with global governance, is the volatility of the global markets. And this volatility of the markets is mainly the financial markets, but all the volatility of the pharmaceutical market, food market, energy market, etc. We have multiple crises that are different phases of the same crisis that affected the global capitalism. And we have expressions that we could say that are the markets that are volatile markets because they're not controlled by any force of the global governance, and the capacity of the national governments to exercise any type of control on that volatility and the cause and origin of the crisis that we're talking about. The third area in which we have a generator of inequality in health and depends on the global governance is the lack of protection of civilians in case of institutionalized violence. That is very important, and we have the whole thing of the military interventions done by the NATO powers and the United States towards let's call it a global stability. What's the control of the United Nations regarding this interventions in the territory of Palestine, Afghanistan, intervention in Iraq that generates thousands of dead and institutionalized violence. This is social cause that is extremely important, a determination of life or death. So the civilians have nothing to do with the military interventions that were verified in the last 20 years. On the other hand, it's already proven the fact that 22% of the expenditure of the United States is what they call defense. And I would like to call it attack, not defense. It's not expenses in defense, but an attack. And it's a way, very crude way of calling this expenses. They're attack expenses. And when we compare, I had a slide with a study showing the expenditure, yearly expenditure during the wars and this institutionalized violence. When it's compared with other expenses inside the United States, that's a problem of the sovereignty and the voters of the United States. But we compare this with the necessary amount of money to reach the Millennium Goals. That is an international commitment. This is a very important component of the social determination, the institutionalized violence and the lack of protection for civilians. Another situation that we, the fourth, is the lack of protection of migrants. There are no law or practice or commitment, international commitment, with the protection of the millions of migrants that today, due to the globalization, we have in South America, from Bolivians to Brazil, from Brazilians to Haiti to Brazil, that we had in the European countries, of course, African countries in Europe, South America, and Central America, and the United States. There is a total and absolute disprotection of these migrants, and this depends on the global governance, the international governance, of agreements to be reached and complied by countries that sign these international agreements.
I would like to call your attention. It would be a fourth dimension. No more dimensions here. His phone is ringing. And finally, the fifth one, that would be a very important factor also, that is a social factor, because I see no more environmental determinant factors as being excluded from the social sphere. I don't know also beyond the Amazon rainforest, the heart of some other forests that which we have today, they would have natural environments. All the environments are constructed by human action. Those are social and political, of course. This provision of public commodities, the determination, the environmental issue as the climate, the loss of biodiversity, and as many others, environmental are political and social too. These factors, and perhaps actually we could call them, in order to locate them within the issue of global governance and the needs of changes in the global governance, as a provision of public global goods or assets, also with all the problems that this entails. And I recommend to you a couple of months, it was published in Portuguese, there was a translation of a fundamental book that has been translated actually on this topic too. This issue, environmental issue, which is a social issue because we don't have natural environments anymore, it's involved basically in the importance of changing once and for all issues of global governance, so that we can have can change these global factors. We can have an action on the quality of life and the health in every single country in the world, and when we also are to consider the different populations, global populations. Now, I'm going to finish my presentation calling all of us to pay attention to this process that started in the 90s within the United Nations framework, with the multiple conference, sectorial conferences held on human rights, on women, on the conference, on the summit of Copenhagen, many conferences that generated at the end, in 2000, the Millennium Summit and the Declaration, the Millennium Development Goals, and that after 15 years, the countries that were good improved a little better. It wasn't what worse, they didn't improve so much as the countries that were better improved. So with the declaration of the Millennium Development Goals, we have an extension of inequalities, unfortunately, in global terms. Now we are talking about the agenda after 2015. That starts basically with the Rio +20, which is the United Nations Earth Conference held in Rio de Janeiro in June of last year, when we are to look at the document of the future that we want to achieve, which is the document of the conference. It's unbelievable. It contains almost absolutely everything, the best of the best. Of course, that we can analyze the language of diplomacy that puts one thing and it contradicts in the following text. And in the same text, a word means something else which is interpreted differently. So this is the specialty of diplomats, meaning they put things ambiguous interpretations. But we can to read clearly the document of the Rio Plus 20 conference, and we can find everything. It is said that health is. I have to read it. I don't know. I have to find it. That heard. It's a result and an indicator of the three dimensions of sustainable development, of the economic, social, and environmental issues. Health is needed to have development. Health should be a result of development and also an indicator of development. Actually, can anybody be against this? Nobody, of course. And this is measures on social determinants, environmental determinants of health are for extreme importance to create inclusive, equitable societies that are healthy and economically productive. Can anybody be against this assumption? No. It's also very important to have the participation by all the different agents, also in order to endeavor a project to cater to the health needs of the whole world population. Also, we are to examine the whole document emanating of the Rio Plus 20 Summit, which is a guiding document to the United Nations, to the countries, to all the different agents of the United Nations, and also which is a call to the civil society that can have all the criticisms that you might imagine. This is what is expected, of course, but this is a call to a document that might be a guiding document of the civil society, of the governments, of the different intra-government sectors, and of the sectors outside these extra-national or global agencies too. So the future that we want to design also follows the series of national consultations, is series of international consultations, in action of a task team of the United Nations, and a long discussion between the governments in New York. Those are four axles. They're going to be converging towards 2013, this year, September, in the United Nations in New York. A document will be drawn that will guide the discussions when we're going to be having to 2015 the Sustainable Development Goals. There's no doubt whatsoever they're going to be having at least one health goal, and there's a struggle with the health goal could be the optimization of health in every levels of life, or being the universal coverage of health for all in the universal system, the universal coverage. So there's a fight, a struggle in this scenario in the United Nations on what will be the Sustainable Development Goal of a goal in terms of health, and we are in face. We are defending, on the one hand, a goal that is related to the tradition of 48 of the Charter that says everybody is entitled to quality health in life, and of course we are in agreement with this Sustainable Development Goal, optimization, maximization of health in every single level of life. And on the other hand, we do have our very own World Health Organization that upholds a contribution, a sectorial contribution of universal coverage, but also with the concept actually that can be challenged within the concept of avoiding catastrophic expenditures with ensuring their health insurance plan, whatever you want to call it, the treatment of diseases, be it to ensuring actually international trade is not, and this is what's being done, for example, in my country, in Brazil, where actually the businesses are open to allow the international laboratories to come, to have the diagnostic laboratories should come, and the international health, in the health insurance company here too should come here. And the decision was made that now we'll have this thing, as SUS we have here, but we have to open our doors to do business here in Brazil, and also for health insurance companies for the new and emerging middle class. So we have something which is brutal, terrible, which is the World Health Organization defends an exclusively sectoral goal and defends the fact that this should be realized to provide assistance and care to people with diseases, and it should be part of the international and national business in health. So this is something that we have to be alert, we have to keep our eyes open on this issue, and I think that we should also discuss this in depth. What is going to be the vision of your vision and our vision, who are activists in the social determinants, where the social determination is important and are concerned in the agenda, so can take this discussion as members of the government to our very own governments. To our very own governments, because the position of UNASUR, the position of each one of our countries, actually will be of extreme importance when the conference in the World Assembly of Health, where this is included, how important it will be. We're going to be discussing the development agenda post-2015 will be discussed in the General Assembly of the United Nations in September. And for my pride and for our happiness, in Brasilia this Wednesday there will be a meeting of the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry of the Environment. They were going to be discussing what the position of Brazil will be when we talk about health in the agenda so after 2015, because we're part of a working group of the foundation that I'm involved. We are pressuring the government because they have to define what's their position in the May Assembly and their position also for the month of September meeting. Of course, the election of the new director of the World Trade Organization is obstructing the broader discussion that is going to be held, because Brazil actually wants, because of course Roberto would be an extraordinary director. We have UNASUR, we have the support of UNASUR to elect Roberto as director. I don't know, is not to defeat defeat the Mexican candidate, but we have competition between NAFTA and UNASUR possibly. I feel free because I have no ties whatsoever. I can only speak my mind in that discussion. And finally, the critical question, the most important question to be posed is if we have a correlation of forces that can make necessary changes in the global governance agenda. If we don't have it, what should we do? And thirdly, what is the contribution made today, or that can be made today by the progressive forces in conceptual terms, in political action, in order to change all these things. If we have progressive governments that do little, also we are going to make an arrangement. The academicians are not proposing different to what it is the most common thought we have is business as usual, more of the same. We have to change things. Those are challenges that we all have in our hands as political agents, as decision makers, as policy designers, in terms of social determination. And this is the end of the presentation. Thank you.